Hello and welcome to this incredibly special episode of the podcast. It is the 300th episode. If you're clicking on it, you've made it through 299 other fantastic shows with myself and accompanying guests. This time, joined by the best of the best, Seb Ostrowicz. How you doing, Seb?
I'm doing very well. I'm thrilled and honored to be brought in for episode number 300. Sometimes this show needs a rebolstering. It needs some fresh talent. The last few hundred episodes have dragged, let's be honest. And it's time to bring in a fresh face, a fresh voice. So here I am. No, but I'm happy to celebrate. 300 is amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's very, very typical of this type of relationship where I was going to say, oh, this is like the all-star game of episodes, and I was going to hype it up and talk about how great you are. And then you pull the episode down. You pull me down.
I think listenership probably by episode 299 is at an all-time low. Spirits are down. Excitement for the podcast is probably lower than it's ever been. So we're doing what we can to bring it back. It's the ECG has shown that there is no pulse. There's no signal. But we're working on it. We're pumping and we're bringing it back to life. No, I'm obviously joking. I think the podcast's probably doing very well, but I've not been on it in a long time.
Yeah, and if people aren't familiar with this dynamic, yeah, that was a joke. The podcast it's the number one weightlifting podcast, period. So I don't know if people have heard of the competitors. One, House of Weightlifting. It might be that one. Yeah, that one's terrible too. I think it's miserable.
Terrible too. Okay.
Yeah, so we have no, but in all seriousness, I wanted to do something more special, but something fun and kind of reflective. Before we started recording, I called this a metasode, and I think that's fitting. Which, when you have these landmark episodes, you just kind of reflect back on the podcast. You think about what that journey's been like, maybe even what you've learned. How you've changed the processes to record or think of topics, and that's what I wanted to do today. And let's start by doing this because you kind of re-engineered and brought back the Weightlifting House podcast. So if people haven't heard that show or listened to that show, you and Nick are recording episodes on that currently. How's it been getting back into the podcasting game?
I would say it's been really fun. I've always enjoyed podcasting. I think it's the one aspect of Weightlifting House that I've not found someone who I think necessarily does a better job than me on. So like everything in Weightlifting House, I now have people who are better than me at, better editors, better product people. I think the podcasting or the commentary, that aspect of things, I think I have great co-hosts that I do different shows with, but I think that's the one thing that I'm never going to be able to outsource. And it's the one thing that I wouldn't want to, because I think it's probably what I enjoy more than anything is being on a mic and actually either commentating on live sport or talking with you and people like you about weightlifting. So in the sense that I'm able to do that again, it's absolutely wonderful. I think I feel a bit more pressure now because Weightlifting House is bigger than just me on a podcast. And a lot of people who follow Weightlifting House don't even know who I am. And that we've sort of upped the quality in everything else we do. And then the podcast stopped for a while and everything else went up, and now bringing it back, I feel exposed, as though there are people who are going to be on Instagram and going to be like, oh, there's a podcast, I'll click the link to that, and then tune in and have no idea who I am. Maybe they've not even listened to a live, watched live weightlifting before, so they haven't heard me. And for the first time, it's like, oh, it's weird that there's this podcast representing this brand. And who is this guy and what gives him the credential to be the voice of it? Not realizing that obviously the whole thing started because it was just me on a microphone. So I think there's a certain level of pressure in that sense, which has been interesting to navigate, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. We're making it much more specific to the sport rather than, the coaching or the programming or the training. But there's a certain group of people for whom the sport of weightlifting is the most exciting thing. So we're catering for them. We're not covering everything anymore, but I think it's going well. People are enjoying it. I hope. I think.
Yeah, I think that you kind of talked about the quality of the podcast and how you are a bit concerned that, all aspects of Weightlifting House, uh, by bringing people who are, better at whatever it may be, have been elevated. The podcast doesn't necessarily feel like that, but as I hear you talk, I think of, so I've been on the way I kind of operate in terms of like my intellectual interests is I'll typically find a thinker and I'll kind of consume a lot of their work. And I've been reading and thinking a lot about Daniel Dennett and his stuff. Just a brilliant guy. I finished his memoir a few days ago, and I finished another one of his books, which was kind of like an overview of a lot of his big picture works. When you listen to him speak, he's so intentional, and every word it feels used the right way,
Mm.
and that magnifies its impact. So someone might listen to the quality of the podcast and think, yeah, it's not perfect. It's not whatever the Chris Williamson show or whoever's famous or popular. But the way you speak, that carries the expertise in it. And I don't know if people
Mm.
pick up on that. I don't even know if they care or consider it. But like
Yeah.
beside the recording and the production, the commentary in the podcast, because you're doing it, that makes it unbelievably top notch. Like really, really good. And I think that's something to seriously consider for all the listeners. It's like it's not easy to do what Seb does. Um
Or you
yeah,
for
or
300 episodes.
yeah.
But you
Yeah.
are right. Like we've got better microphones now, which I apologize I'm not using for this episode because can't get into the studio right now. But I think that helps. And then what I would like to do is when I'm back from paternity leave, because I'm going to be off for a few weeks, when I'm back, look into filming it with
Mhm.
like a multicam setup
Oh,
and
cool.
then having that go out on YouTube because I feel like that could rack up. I mean, it's not going to be crazy, it's never going to be 100,000 viewers watching a weightlifting podcast, but it could be a decent number. And for the people who are like in that inner concentric circle of the sport, like who are just obsessed with it, it's a great product for them. It might not be for everybody, but we're not necessarily going after everybody because we just care about, the diehards of the sport. Well, not just the diehards, but like if we focus on them, it kind of take care of everyone else. So I think we might look into doing it video properly.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the best way to go about it. I do have a question based on that, and this is maybe a question you would kind of mirror back after you answer it. But I was gonna, start the question with after 300 episodes. That obviously doesn't apply to you, but after, call it 8 years of podcasting, because I remember recording in 2017, and I'm pretty sure that's when you started the Weightlifting House podcast. It was
Yeah,
like late
2017,
2017.
April 2017.
Oh, April.
Yeah,
Holy shit.
yeah,
Okay, so
April 16th, 2017.
okay, damn. So
Yeah.
obviously been in it a little while. What are some of the some of the things you've learned? I'm trying to figure out a way to frame this so it's like reflective but not specific just to podcasting. I guess about communication that you find important. Maybe with the commentary too. Um, Skills you've learned, things you've kind of been reflective of that has allowed you to be a better podcaster and commentator. And then that's kind of carried beyond just the episode itself.
It's a good question, and I was actually assuming that we were going to ask a question like this, and I was going to ask you the same one, so you can go back after. But I think that what it has made me, so even just then, me taking 4 or 5 seconds of silence is probably a good example of what I'm trying to say, which is that I'm much more careful about the words that I choose, which you've already mentioned earlier in this episode, to describe the feeling that I'm having or the emotion that I'm trying to get across to people or the excitement that I feel about a very specific thing that's up and coming in weightlifting. So rather than trying to, and that also comes down to the questions as well. So rather than a broad question and then a broad emotional answer, like how do you feel about the 2025 World Championships, oh, I'm excited. It would be much more like, given that all of the athletes are coming to Norway, which is not known for its weightlifting and doesn't necessarily have the infrastructure, what changes or differences do you think we might see in the hotels and training hall at that competition? Suddenly, like the question, I mean, that's not necessarily even an interesting question, but it's certainly a lot more interesting than what do you think about the upcoming world champs? And then the answer then needs to be way more considered and be like, well, considering the fact that the town that it's in only has a population of 5,000, we're going to be seeing people opening up their homes for Airbnb, North Koreans living with random Norwegians. That's going to give, and then
Yeah.
suddenly you've just got something interesting has happened. So I think being much more specific about what do you actually want to ask, and what do you actually then want to answer with, I think are both extremely valuable. And I do it less in the commentary, because in the commentary, I think there's a sense of sometimes you add and sometimes you're just required background noise. And if no one said anything for a long time, that isn't enjoyable. So sometimes you just say things to say them, just so that there's this like constant, every few seconds, the commentator's saying something, except once the athlete's on the platform, obviously. But certainly in podcast form, and then taken outside of that, I think the way I speak to other people is far more like trying to target down a very specific question that I'm going to ask and then provide very specific answers. And that has fed me very well in life, I think. So the idea of just being as articulate as possible is definitely one of them. But right back at you, Josh. Let's take an example of what I just said and make sure I don't just say, what do you think? So Josh, what are the things that you think you've learned from podcasting that you couldn't necessarily have learned outside of podcasting that have then helped you outside of podcasting?
Yeah, I love that answer. I mentioned Daniel Dennett earlier in the show. When you listen to him speak, it almost has this irregular cadence, and that it's because, especially when you're in a more formal setting or professional setting, it's like you try to use your words as well as possible to cut across whatever ideas or concepts you're trying to convey. So if people go and they just YouTube Daniel Dennett, depending on people's interests, he had a really interesting conversation with Richard Dawkins about Charles Darwin and like the idea of evolution by natural selection. It's like a fantastic conversation. I'd go listen to that. I think that's a big one, is being reflective, being careful. I think a piece of that that accompanies it is just that awareness of, and what people may not know about podcasting. As you listen to this episode, it probably feels very, very informal, very conversational, very thoughtful. It is work to have like a really well executed conversation, right? It's not just kind of talking casually, and there's that like there are these little like awareness points that I found. So it's this like heightened attunement with conversation of, how does this feel like it's going? How am I conveying myself? How am I cutting across? How's the other person receiving what I'm communicating? So I think that like attunement's been really fascinating, and I kind of like it because it's really really like regular feedback of how effectively I'm using my language to convey ideas, which I like. It's similar to writing. A lot of people are probably going to be more familiar with writing, whether that's just kind of going through undergrad or whatever period of schooling they had, but you can kind of read it back and you get this feedback of like, hey, that's kind of shit, I need to edit that, rework, and then finally get to a polished product. And with conversation, it's much faster from kind of like start to finish, and that you don't get a do-over necessarily, but you can use the feedback of the last point to inform the next one and the next one and the next one. And I really kind of enjoy that like gamification of it. It keeps it interesting.
Something interesting that you said that it's kind of like when you write, you have the benefit of kind of like sculpting slowly. Now, I do that because I write a lot for Weightlifting House. We do a lot of different written things, and starting with a broad thing and then trying to cut it down and make it neat and make it sound right and give it good rhythm, and every word needs to mean something. But then I was thinking about what you were saying, because having a conversation, you don't get that luxury of doing that. But it's more free flowing. And it reminded me of a podcast I was listening to recently, and I cannot remember who it was with, but if it comes to me, I'll mention it. And they were talking about people who, oh, I do know who it was, but I can't think of either of their names. It'll come to me later. Talking about people who try to understand philosophy, and they say, oh, I don't want to listen to these two people talking about philosophy. I want to read the book. But a lot of the books that were written, from the Greeks or the Romans or whatever, like core philosophical texts, were basically written to capture the conversations that were had. And sometimes that's why they're written as conversations between people, because to reach the level of understanding of philosophy, there has to be a back and forth where someone is continually asking and questioning and critiquing, so that you can get there together, whether it's with the person you're talking to or the reader. You need to help back and forth, get there together, ask a question, answer it. But maybe it doesn't work. Oh, but it does in this situation, and back and forth like that. And so people think, oh, I should read philosophy. But actually, a lot of philosophy is best understood, heard through conversation. And so I think actually, obviously, I don't do any of that philosophical stuff, but you are literally the philosophical weightlifter. So I think there's a huge benefit to learning philosophy, or at least interesting concepts. Could be political, could be sports, could whatever it is, but just learning it through conversation rather than trying to read. And sometimes the reading is just the boiling down and the sculpting of those great conversations. But a lot of people just like to listen to the conversations because that helps you follow along and how to actually get to the place. Because with philosophy, presumably, the destination is not preordained. Like, you don't know where you're going. The whole point, the whole exercise is in the conversation. And then where you end is just the right answer. And you don't know what that right answer is going to be before you get there. So I think listening to that all take shape through a conversation is very interesting for people.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful way to frame it. And I always enjoy when philosophy gets dragged into it. So you kind of talked about like what you've, I guess, learned from podcasting or commentary or whatever it may be. Are there, and you mentioned wanting to, I guess, like level up the podcast itself and improve the quality of it for the Weightlifting House podcast. What are the unexplored avenues for you of ways to do that well? I mean, as a commentator, as a podcaster, the skill itself. I mean, with writing, you can kind of feel changes in quality, but I guess the changes could be more discreet. With podcasting, do you feel like you've kind of maximized whatever you can gain from it in terms of like what you bring to the episode, what you bring to the commentary? It's just a matter of expertise. And then you have the communication skills, you have pretty much everything to deliver that. It's just the quality of like the show itself or the commentary itself.
Yeah, I think, well, also just the podcast, by the way, it was Alex O'Connor and Rory Sutherland.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
So like a philosopher theologian and like an advertising psychological guy. So yeah, I think that most of the improvements in podcasting from Weightlifting House podcast to your podcast is probably done in the packaging and distribution of the podcast. A lot of great new podcasters have been going for a long time. And if you go back to the earlier episodes, you don't enjoy them as much because they just don't sound as good and you can't necessarily watch them. And it's just not as accessible. It's just not as enjoyable. For example, like Dr. Mike Israetel has a podcast, the RP podcast or Renaissance Periodization podcast. I listened to it years ago, and it's him and his Nick Shaw, I think is his name, his co-founder, and they're clearly on Zoom. It's not great quality, like they don't have great mics. And you think, okay, this probably does not get many listens, like maybe in the very low thousands. The YouTube channel with really high production, even like a 40-minute video or a podcast where he's on someone else's podcast, will get like hundreds of thousands or millions of views.
Yeah.
And it's the same voice and it's the same, he's not changing how he is. It's just the product. It's just the packaging of it. So I think that whilst I can obviously get better at the questions that I ask or the ideas that I have, or even I think a lot more these days about like the concepts of the show, like what is this episode going to be about specifically? I can always get better at that stuff, but probably it's in how do we then make it look like something that people want to click and then stay engaged whilst either listening or watching. So now with Nick, I think because he's a lot less, he's less familiar with podcasting compared to you, for example, way less familiar. I mean, it's just a very new thing to him. He likes to be told this episode, we're going to talk about this. And it will be, for example, 4 underrated weightlifters that we think will be famous in 3 years or something like that. And then he'll go away and I'll go away and we'll spend half an hour to an hour on our own, really thinking it through and trying to come up with who they are. So we basically scaffolded out the entire episode. I don't know his answers. He doesn't know mine. And then we do the episode rather than like, shall we talk about underrated weightlifters? Yes. 3, 2, 1, let's go. So we considering what are the topics that people would be more interested in. And then I have a list now of just written them down of like episodes that we know will do well because people will be interested in the topics. Like, can Olivia repeat in LA 2028? Like that episode has been recorded, it's ready because that's a topic that people want to know. What's Carlos Nassar going to hit at the next World Championships? That one's done. Biggest intra-country battles or teammate battles of the upcoming quad. We know that's an interesting one, so it's done. So it's coming up with like, what are the interesting questions that fans of the sport would want to know? And then really delivering on the promise of answering that question. Because I remember you and I, and some people absolutely love it. Like we'll have a more like rambling, free-flowing conversation. Yeah. But towards the end of when you and I were doing podcasts together loads, I remember I'd say to you, okay, let's get straight into it.
Yeah.
And then we can ask each other how we're doing after 40 minutes and like catch up. But like, let's not say that we're going to talk about this and then people click on it. And then it's like, yeah, I was at a meet the other day, you know, it's like, let's deliver on the promise and then let's do the catch up at the end. So I think I'm just thinking of it more like I'm thinking of the podcast more as a product, not in a way of taking out the joy of it, but in a way of like per unit of like audio time, is this really impactful and valuable? I think that's kind of how I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
I think that's a great answer. It's kind of funny too. I started asking that question and that question was informed by an earlier thing you said in the podcast of, asking detailed questions, asking specific questions that have, a more obvious, maybe not more obvious, but like a more concrete answer than something that's really open-ended, really broad, and doesn't really direct the person. So I was like, I had that in the back of my mind as I was asking that, and I think you answered it like beautifully. I would agree that, the packaging is huge. I'm going to use these words a bit commonly, but there's a lot of like brain candy podcasts. It's just kind of people chatting and you probably feel like you're with 2 friends or 2 people who are kind of like funny or witty or just silly or kind of like idiotic. And then there are the episodes that are work to keep up with, and very, very elaborate, very intellectual. And I think that what that means is that you could probably be successful doing any of the sort. A lot of that is just the delivery of the content itself, being able to kind of like be an attractive brand or be an attractive podcast to people. So I completely hear you on that. And
got a question for you if you want one.
Yeah, shoot.
Because I know otherwise you're just going to keep trying to ask questions and you're not going to get asked them.
Yeah.
So you've done 300 episodes. I don't know how long it's taken you. A long time. Not like it's taken you longer than it should, but it's just, 300 episodes takes a long time. It's 300 hours of conversation or more probably. So and I know that at times there's always a sense of like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. There's just so much to do. Like, so what would have to happen in the next 300 episodes for you to be pleased that you carried on for another 300? And an example answer of that could be, it's the caliber of the guest you get on. It could be, it's the number of listens per episode. what it could be the monetization aspect, like what needs to happen for the next 300 where you look back and you go, I'm glad I carried that going.
Yeah, so I'm going to peel back the veil a little bit, and thank you for pulling me out of my automatic podcasting response of just like, keeping the conversation going, asking questions. So the things I would say is people who will listen to the podcast may not be aware of this consciously, but they might actually sense it when they listen to the episodes. Some of the guests I've been able to have on, it's fucking awesome. I mean, I recorded a show that was going to be released with Michael Roberts, who's like one of the foremost experts on muscle hypertrophy. And he actually wrote a review, like mechanisms of overload with skeletal muscle. And it's got like 900 citations. And it's like insane. So I reached out to him and we had a conversation about, it's so interesting you even talk about the packaging. We had a conversation about aging well. And I was like, oh, this is a total like health optimization podcast topic. This is this is a guy people would see on all of those big name, big ticket podcasts. And it's cool to have him on and to be able to facilitate a conversation. I had Scott Barry Kaufman on. And now that episode felt like it didn't go well to me. It actually felt pretty bad while I was recording it. But he's like multiple books. He's written a paper with Jordan Peterson. Like he's all over the place in cognitive science. Stephen Hayes, like a lot of the guests have been so well known and so mainstream, or they have the potential of that, if they get on the right episode, or the right show. And that's been pretty cool to be able to facilitate those. I actually met Jordan from Barbell Medicine at Nationals. We were on the same warm up platform, and Max was talking to him, and I was able to introduce myself and chat with him. Just funny because him and Max both have a similar sense of humor, so it's funny to see them riff about like starting strength, like shit like that. But
you have spoken to Jordan on the podcast before, right?
Yeah. So we did.
So when you introduced yourself, it was more like a reintroduction.
Yeah, which is always kind of different to me. And I don't know how you feel, but I remember I have this one instance that sticks out. I was at the Arnold, I think it was 2022, and Danny Camargo was walking by. I see Danny, I'm like, oh, Danny, my name's Josh. It's like, nice. He's like, I know who you are. We recorded a podcast together. And it's like, I know that. I know they know me, but it's weird for Jordan from Barbell Medicine to be like, oh yeah, like we know each other.
Like my assumption would be that, and I think this is a correct assumption, is that Jordan would have no idea who I was if he saw me.
Yeah.
Because even though we've done a podcast, there is no way that he would remember. I mean, I've done podcasts with people and I would not recognize them if I saw them.
Yeah, totally.
Like not people who've been on mine, but if I've been on someone else's, I would not remember that person necessarily. So I totally understand that there are probably plenty of people that he sort of knows and he's had an hour-long conversation with, but he would have no idea who they were in real life.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool to be able to interact with him. But he's
that sounds fun.
He's coming on the show in a couple of weeks.
Is barbell medicine still big? I assume it is.
I think so. Yeah. And it's so weird kind of being pulled from that space, because I used to follow it so closely. But yeah, I think it's doing really, really well. So in terms of what you kind of posed to me, it's like the quality of the guests have been great. I think the conversation has been really good and really kind of up my alley. I think that's a little bit different from the way I'd go if I wanted to maximize listenership. I think I'm getting too into my own personal interests.
Yes, you definitely have made it less about philosophical weightlifting and more about Josh's intellectual curiosities.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Might be due for a rebranding, but yeah, I've been able to get on guests and just kind of pursue ideas and topics that I find really fascinating. So I think that's carried me this far. And then to do another 300, I would actually like to change or augment the packaging of it, like the branding. Trying to figure out how, but I mean, I think it's more obvious. I just don't want to do it. I don't know.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
It's just so difficult to get people to listen and watch stuff that you do. It's just not an easy game, to be honest. But I reckon, 300 more is tough.
Yeah. Because when you put into perspective, you do one a week, 300 is roughly 6 years.
Yeah.
It's a long fucking time.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah, you're going to be old man by then.
I'm already old.
Yeah, you are.
Well,
So am I.
I mean, and then by proxy, you are too. So
I'm a little bit younger than you.
I can tell how spry you are too. The way you shifted in your chair is quick.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm a little bit sore in my lower back at the moment, but I'm all good.
yeah.
I'm feeling pretty fit, pretty lean and mean,
I
you
mean, you
know?
look good. You look good.
Okay.
So give you one more question. I'll kind of get to more casual stuff. What advice would you have to myself? So to me, which is like, kind of a cliche question, but really to people interested in getting in the podcast space. Because I've been on shows with guys, and shout out to the Red Gauge podcast. They've had me on twice. They had me and Danny on one episode, which was a ton of fun to record with them. And I've been on a ton of other podcasts, and people are interested in, oh, I'd love to make this a fucking massive endeavor and make it really successful. And some people are kind of doing the same thing I'm doing. I just want to record a show to have, you know, it on my CV, or as a means of like just intellectual kind of like fulfillment on that end. But for new podcasters, you taking this like 8 years of time doing it and developing a brand off the back of it, um, what would you say to someone who's interested?
I think my answer wouldn't be specific to podcasting. It's specific to the question of starting any endeavor. And it works for podcasting as well as it would work for starting a business or trying a new sport or something. I think it would be to try and work out before you start what it is that at its core you most want to get out of it. And then maybe try and put in some metrics in place that allow you to reevaluate at a certain point whether it's worth continuing pursuing. So in a non-podcasting sense, it might be like, I want to get into weightlifting because I don't currently have good mobility. And I love the idea that I'm not only mobile, but I'm strong within that mobility. And I'm going to check this. I'm going to give it everything I can for 10 weeks. And if at the end of those 10 weeks, my mobility has not improved, maybe I'll try something else. And if it has improved and I can sit in the bottom of an overhead squat with a barbell, then that's great. And it's clearly working and it's helping me reach what I want. So I'll keep going. And in the same sense with podcasting, I don't think, like in weightlifting, you shouldn't say, I want to get in weightlifting because I want to become an Olympic champion. You shouldn't say, I want to get into podcasting because I think I want to be the next Joe Rogan. Because like, if that is what you're aiming for and that's your goal, like it's probably not going to happen. And some people will make that their goal and it will happen. And then that story will get published everywhere because it's an amazing story and it'll make people think that that's the way things happen, but it's not. So, I mean, the way podcasting in terms of an economy is like even more skewed in the 80-20 principle than almost any other medium, like far more than YouTube. In YouTube, the views are distributed much more how you'd imagine. There are some people who get loads, some people who don't get many. In podcasting, it's like if you're in the top 200, you get, it's not even like, if you're in the top 2% or 1% of podcasts, you probably get 99.99% of all of the downloads. Like it's crazily distributed. So I think if you want to get into something like podcasting, I know that when I started, I did not have the goal of being the biggest weightlifting podcast, or I certainly didn't have the goal of starting Weightlifting House, the media clothing equipment company. My goal was, I am so desperate and thirsty to have conversations with coaches so that I can understand how to improve my training better. That even if nobody listens, and I can measure this by looking back, after 10 weeks, have I had questions that have been answered by people who I trust? And looking back, the answer was yes. It was like, okay, carry on. Because the metric I was looking for was increasing my own knowledge of what I was interested in. It might be that you look at it and you go, okay, there's a job I want. And I think if I have this podcast, and get these guests on, I'm going to be more likely to get the job because I can put it on my CV. I've never heard of anyone doing that, but I'm sure there are lots of reasons why you might want to start a podcast. That's a good one. Like, make that the reason and then try and do it, but don't necessarily go straight in with, I'm trying to be Joe Rogan, because you're not going to be. But there are so many things that something like podcasting or training or any endeavor can bring you. They just can't bring you everything. So just note down the specific thing that you'd be happy with if all else failed, and then be willing to move on if that also fails.
No, that's a great answer. One thing I've been thinking a lot about is how much time we assume like change will happen within like the span of time. And I think about this in the context of work. So I was talking to Chris Taper, and he was talking about teaching, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the first year is kind of rough. The second year you kind of get into a groove." I think if you told most people like, "Yeah, the first year is rough. The second year will be good." You don't really know that like, oh, this thing is going to take a long time to kind of like come into its own, and then kind of be rolling. I think that idea of, you mentioned getting into it, having some sort of metrics, and having some sort of like end interest that makes sense, that allows you to get through that period of like, oh, I thought everything would happen a lot faster. And I think that's a pretty typical assumption for anything, because it would feel good for it to happen quickly.
Yeah.
Think about from a coaching standpoint. When I started coaching, I think I was talking to you about this. I was like in my bedroom, and I don't know if I was like on the phone with you or if I was sending you a voice message or what, but I kind of mentioned my end goal as a coach is to have produced someone from basically like the ground floor, from never having lifted or trained, to like national champion, we'll call it, or competing internationally. Like I remember telling you that. And maybe I thought it would happen a lot faster. So it's looking like it's probably going to happen next year. But I've been coaching now for around 10 years. And I think that idea of, uh, you know, imagined expediency with whatever it is just, it's kind of, you kind of have to be able to look through that and see, any process for anything that, I don't want to say, I would hate to say worth doing, but like anything that's going to be require time and expertise, and is in a place that a lot of people are, competing for the top spots. So you talk about, all the top podcasts kind of get all the downloads and all the listens. It's probably going to take a lot more work and time and effort to get there than you could even imagine. And I'm sure a lot of people experience this with their weightlifting journey or their competitive athletic journey, of like how much time it actually takes to develop. And that means like, oh, I was able to finally qualify for this national meet in a few years. I thought it'd be much faster. Or, wow, I actually am never going to be able to qualify for this national meet.
But it's almost like there's a difference there, because in weightlifting, the fruits come early on, and you're wild with your technique, but PRs come easy. And then over time, progress is stagnant. So it does take a lot of time, but it takes a lot of time to get to the point where you don't really make progress anymore. That's like the value of staying in it, which is very weird. And that's the same with all sports.
Yeah.
Whereas something like podcasting, very little happens for a very long time, and then things start to happen.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're reversed, where if you're wanting to start a business or start a podcast or something, all of the good things are going to happen in years 5, 6, and more good things will happen in 7 than all the years prior. And it's going to be exponentially positive in that way. And then in weightlifting, the progress is exponential in the other way, where like the first year you can gain 20 kilos, the next year it's 15, the year after that it's 8, then it's 2, and then it's 1 every 3 years or something like that. So they teach you very different things, I think. Like, one, you just have to dig into and just recognize that it's only going to get worse in some ways. Like, weightlifting only gets harder. It gets more and more difficult to get every single PR. Whereas the longer you stay in something like podcasting, potentially, or business, potentially things only get easier every year because you have this like breadth of uh, experience behind you that just starts opening up more and more opportunities as they come.
Do you do you think with the weightlifting house or starting a business in weightlifting, try to think of a question that frames that for you, like how you were able to navigate those many years where it wasn't anything, but my thought of it from my own personal experience is like the novelty of all the things you do along the way in that initial period where things are like slower growing. It's so like intrinsically interesting. It's like coaching, right? It's like, oh, I wrote my, I had my first athlete. The first person I worked with, I made $20 a month. It's like, oh, I have my
Yeah.
first athlete. Who cares how much I make? This is just intrinsically interesting. And then it's okay. Now I have my first power lifter and weightlifter, and I was this. Okay, now I have my first team. Right now I'm working my first club. Okay, now I'm coaching at my first national meet. Okay, now I'm coaching people on the podium. Okay, now I'm trying to coach a national champion or someone who's doing something fucking insane, unbelievable in the sport. And I think all of those things are intrinsically so interesting. They kind of pull you along the way so you don't get lost or swallowed up by the expanse of no little to no return on anything to where eventually you can get to that point of, okay, I'm on the other side and I've kind of made it far enough where it's self-sustaining enough and rewarding, fulfilling enough that I don't have to like rationalize my staying in it. Was it that same experience for you? I know that like all those kind of like different milestones were so, you know, just so probably so strongly motivating and interesting and capturing that it's like you didn't get swallowed up by the 5 years of little to no return.
Yes, I think that when you first start out, like you don't even produce enough to sustain yourself. Like you said, you get that first $20, you know, athlete, and like the idea of like charging them $25 makes you feel sick. But like you can't fuel yourself off that. So
Yeah.
like when Weightlifting House started, it was not enough. I on my own was not able to create enough value to weightlifters to pay myself. And then eventually I was able to get to the point where I could. And then maybe I could create enough value to pay myself and have 10% value left over. And when I'm talking about this, I'm literally just talking about money. Like this is just kind of the way it works. Like let's say I could pay myself a certain amount and have $100 in excess every single month after that. And you do that for a while, then you add that all to a pot, this excess, and then it takes you a long time before there's enough in that pile where you're like, okay, I can now bring on the next person. And then you both work at that same level where you both create another $100 each. I mean, this is a random number. I'm just making this up, but like, so then getting that third person then is easier because you've got two people working towards it. So almost things are so slow at the start. Like you can't even do enough for just yourself. And then you start adding people and they start contributing to this total value of what you're actually giving to weightlifters in the world. Like they're helping, like they make the knee sleeves look better. They make the production look better. They make the YouTube look better. They improve the different variations of straps that you have. And suddenly like all of their value becomes so meaningful that you almost look at it and you're like, I don't even know specifically what my individual value here is anymore, other than just ensuring that they're all happy, they all love what they're doing, and that I continue to find really good people to come in rather than just random people. And I think that's definitely the phase where I'm at, where I said it at the start, didn't I, that I'm not better than anyone at anything anymore,
Yeah.
except for just speaking on the microphone. And who knows, hopefully one day I'll be replaced in that sense. I mean, I'd love to be able to do it, but there must be people out there who can, with proper training, talk about weightlifting better than me. It's very unlikely that I am literally the best in the world.
Yeah.
Like, there will be people that we can find, and if we can find them, we should get them.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure if that did actually totally answer your question, but the whole idea about things Like you're doing everything at the start, which is incredibly exciting. Like you write articles, you post on Instagram, you make a video, you try and source a t-shirt, like you just do everything, but almost nothing comes back to you. And then later you like individually, you're having such a small effect on everything, but big things are happening. So it's like a really weird switch, which I think is why you get lots of serial entrepreneurs, because they love that initial,
Interesting.
they can really build, but then eventually they hire a CEO to run the company, or they sell it or something, or they just can't continue it because they're not the sort of person who can headhunt talent and keep an eye on everyone and make sure that, you know, meetings are going well and that projects are on schedule, because they just want to, you know, they go, oh, yeah, I want to start track and field house and just, you know, get back in my bedroom, start recording videos and grinding and try again, because that just sounds fun. There are lots of different stages of business. We're very early on in really any of them. Like we're still tiny ultimately, but it's a very different place now than it was even 2 years ago. Actually, I'd say it's very different. It's definitely different to 2017. Yeah,
That's insane. It's almost like building the car for someone else to drive it, and you have to learn
yeah,
all about the pieces and the parts, and you have to kind of
yeah.
you have to develop that expertise. But once you put it together, you're like, I actually can't drive this well. They're trained drivers.
Yeah, because I think if you're obsessed with vintage cars and you just have a podcast about vintage cars and you're like, I want to learn about how to make them, you attract other people who like vintage cars, but you attract someone who's better at doing the paint job and someone who's better at like putting the engine back together. And then after a while, you're like, man, I think I just love vintage cars more than anyone, but like I can't make a vintage car as well as my team now. So now I just need to make sure that my team is really enjoying making their vintage cars
Yeah,
and that I
yeah.
enjoy still podcasting about vintage cars. Like that, it kind of gets to that point, which is really weird, but it's definitely that point,
That's
which is
awesome.
probably good because my life's going to get a whole lot busier in the next few days. So probably a
Yeah,
good thing.
yeah, um, yeah. I, ha, people know about that, right?
I've not made a point of saying anywhere, no, but I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind saying it. I'm going to have a kid in the next, well, maybe by the time this is out, potentially. But yeah, my wife is 39 plus weeks pregnant, so anytime now.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, definitely changed the weightlifting landscape for you, but
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
not for anyone else.
Yeah,
Um,
traveling might get a little bit more complicated, but we'll make it work. I'm
yeah,
glad it's happening now rather than like 3 years ago. That would have been much more devastating to Weightlifting House.
yeah, yeah. No, totally. It seems like you have people who can basically fill every role that you had your own hand in when you started it. Uh,
Yeah.
from filming to product development to, you know, being able to translate that into media and marketing and yeah, which is really impressive. The last question, you know, that comes to mind thinking about we open the podcast with, you know, what are the skills we feel like we've developed through doing this? And I think those are generally useful. And it's funny being in an academic setting, you present quite often. You know, in class, you might have 2, 3, 4 presentations. I fucking smash those now. It's just because I'm
Mm.
so trained in delivering information to people. From the business side of things, um, how comfortable or confident would you feel starting a different business outside of weightlifting based on what you've just done?
I, I would feel much more confident
Okay.
than I was obviously in 2017, but I don't want to.
Okay.
When you're starting a company, all you're desperate for is for people to like it and for people to buy things and tune in, and like it's taken us so long to get there. Like the last thing I want to do is start track and field house.
Yeah.
Like no, just
Yeah.
no way.
How do you
Um,
feel having, you know, I don't know if the numbers mean much, but having hundreds of thousands of people tune in to basically what you and the team do and to want to sport and support a brand that you basically created from a podcast with Glenn Pinley, RIP.
RIP. Yeah. How do I feel? it's so cliche to say that you don't feel, you acclimate to your current situation so fast that you don't feel how you hoped 8 years ago that you would feel. Like if 8 years ago I came into the current Weightlifting House HQ to visit for a day and was told this is it, it would probably be the best day of my life. Because it was like, oh my God, look at these people everywhere, look at these products, wow, look at the number of followers. You just don't feel like that. But you do feel a sense, or at least I do. I think I'm fortunate too, because a lot of people don't feel this. I do feel a sense of accomplishment and security. And I've always been a very optimistic and relaxed person. So like my general outlook on life is always pretty good. But I don't have those really deep level sort of crippling anxiety levels that I've had in the past of feeling like at any moment everything could all fall apart, because it really could have all fallen apart. So I think I feel a lot more I feel good in myself that like whatever happens now, I've actually created something that was pretty good. And I just want it to, I just want it to stay really fun. That's the thing. Like I want everybody who works here to be like, this is a really good place to work. Like it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's not too stressful. We're doing cool things. We're constantly progressing. Like just make it a fun place to be. I care a lot more about that now than I did before. Yeah.
The very last thing, and then we'll end the show. Because that was a really interesting point about not having that like crippling, worrying about the success of a company or a business. What made Weightlifting House different from all the other brands that started and perished between that time? Why has it become
Well,
something where you can feel relaxed and optimistic and lead a team?
I think the first thing is what businesses like who's tried? I don't even have there been weightlifting companies that have tried and failed? Like I don't even know if they have. I mean, there are definitely weightlifting companies that are small and haven't grown, or are big and haven't grown, or are big and have gotten smaller or something. But there aren't. It's not like there are tons of weightlifting companies popping up. So I I don't think there are loads that are trying and failing. I think the reason we're probably growing faster than others is because, well, I think if I answer that as saying because, then I'm suggesting that I know what other companies are doing, and I don't. So I can only really answer based on what I think we're doing that's right, which is we try to give as much as possible, I guess, for free. So like we're trying to provide a service to weightlifters. Like we're trying to give them a place to go where they can watch the sport or learn about the athletes or get hyped up. And there is zero cost to that. Like you can just go on any platform and just watch weightlifting, and we will spend extreme amounts of money to make and produce and capture all of that for everybody for free. But, and then, so I feel like people recognize that we're doing a good thing. I mean, we have on our, like, we just have it written like in the building, like bring the sport of weightlifting close to the fans. Like it's just there. Well, it's actually fans, athletes, and coaches, but like that's just a North Star. Like we just constantly ask, like, should we do this thing? Like today, we've got a new person who is working in designing clothes, and she's amazing. And today is her first day officially working at Weightlifting House. And I had a meeting with her earlier, and she brought up again something about, at some point maybe you really should go into CrossFit because you really will be able to sell a lot of clothes. And I didn't even have to say it. Nick just said, yeah, we're just not ever going to do that. Like we are just weightlifting. And we just are. Like all we're going to do is weightlifting. Maybe CrossFitters will look over and be like, wow, that's cool that those strong people wear that. I'll get it. But we are just weightlifting, and we're 100% that. We're not looking for anything else. We're not going to bring out, casual trainers for people to wear. We're always just going to stick to weightlifting. I think that's what we're always going to do. And we're going to try and do it as well as we can. And we're not going to, if we're not going to bullshit anyone, we're not going to bring out something that we don't think is good. We're not going to bring out something that a world champion or a world record holder wouldn't wear or wouldn't use. There is too much trust now built up in Weightlifting House that we cannot tarnish. We cannot do anything that is a money grab. It's not worth it for the general brand. Like, we're trying to be the brand of weightlifting. We're trying to just be synonymous with weightlifting. Like, if you think weightlifting, you think Weightlifting House. And to do that, you can't be like pulling that sort of crap. And I'm not saying other companies do, because I don't think they necessarily do. But I think we've just been extremely honest and extremely giving and creating as much as possible, that I think we've just managed to find a place in the weightlifting ecosystem. But there is so much more to do. Like, we're just not, I mean, if you go to USA Nationals and you look around and you look to all the women, how many leggings were they wearing that were Weightlifting House? Like, almost none. Like, that's going to all have to change, and it will change. And we've got like big plans to change all of that. But like, it's not like we're everywhere.
Yeah.
But we're somewhere enough that we're kind of safe. And hopefully we'll be in more places as time goes by. Yeah, that's what I would say.
What a great way to round it out.
Yeah.
If people, if people want to support Weightlifting House, where can they go to lead the movement of getting leggings on more lifters?
Just go to Weightlifting House anywhere. It doesn't, yeah, it's all good. Do you feel like you have given enough, answered enough for your 300th episode?
I'm just happy to be here, man. I'm happy to have another conversation with you about weightlifting and podcasting, and to kind of reintroduce this conversation to the listenership, and hopefully people have enjoyed it. If you have,
I mean, when I'm back off paternity leave, I want to do more podcasts with you, where you just do Weightlifting House podcast, and we just, instead of doing it in the room, we just do it with good mics, on this sort of platform, and then I can just upload it, because I think people would like to have those conversations again on Weightlifting House.
Yeah, well, hopefully people enjoyed it, and if you did, you can leave a trace of evidence of that by leaving a 5-star review on any podcasting platform. You can also support Weightlifting House using the code PHILWL, PHILWL. And if anyone's interested, that actually really helps support me. So if people would like to use that, they can. And it's Philosophical Weightlifting everywhere else. I revamped the website. You can go check that out. All services are available through there. And thank you guys for joining us on this very special episode of the podcast. It is a monumental one, and we will catch you all next time.